Hello and welcome to the Libertarian Perspective. My name is Jonathan Loesche. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party of Duval County. I have with me today the chairman of the Libertarian Party of Duval County, Mr. Curtis Wolf.
How you doing?
All right. And also our special guest today from the People United for Medical Marijuana, or PUFM, Mr. Rick Reese. How you doing, Mr. Reese?
I'm good, and thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you very much for coming on. So, today's episode will be discussing about medical marijuana in Florida and what it could potentially mean. So, Mr. Reese, could you describe what it is PUFM?
Okay, PUFM is People United for Medical Marijuana. We're a political action committee in the state of Florida working to change the laws concerning cannabis, in particular medicinal use of cannabis, at the legislative level. This would make it so that we go during session, we lobby the congressmen and senators and try to get the laws passed. Or laws changed, actually. Okay.
And what are some of the benefits of medicinal cannabis?
There's several benefits to it. First and foremost is the safe and compassionate use of cannabis. Cannabis has never had a fatality in recorded history. It's been used for 5,000 years among many cultures of the world for medicine. There's no need to actually smoke it, because many people, the first thing you think of is you smoke marijuana. And yes, you can smoke marijuana, but you are also able to eat it and to vaporize it, both of which are much more medically friendly to your body. The other thing about the safety of marijuana is that people would be able to grow some of their own medicine because it is safe enough for them to handle and to use and to produce. The other half of safe is compassionate use. Compassionate is simply because people should not have to break the law in order to help themselves, particularly if they're suffering from some sort of ailment. There's not a reason. I mean, doctors today will happily give you narcotics and many things that are very dangerous. They'll tell you on TV just how dangerous they are. Cannabis, on the other hand, has very few unwanted side effects, and it's very safe for use.
But, I mean, those government ads they run on TV, they tell you how you're just going to end up being someone who's going to lay around all day or just go to Taco Bell all the time. Well, what's the basis of that?
Well, for one thing about going to Taco Bell all the time, okay, let's just address that. That is a side effect of cannabis, but although it is not always an unwanted side effect. Many people who have wasting disease associated with AIDS, also with chemotherapy treatment and cancer treatment, it helps them to eat. So that does work. But as far as it being unsafe and you're going to do things you wouldn't normally do, you're going to be completely lazy, these people who do this most likely be doing that anyway. It's just that simple.
Okay. And what are obviously, and what are some of the benefits to allowing medical marijuana, not just for the patients, but to anyone who doesn't smoke marijuana, the John Q. taxpayer?
Oh, now the taxpayer, they would enjoy many benefits, particularly in the state of Florida. The cost just for prohibition in this state runs about $1.9 billion annually just to enforce cannabis laws. No other laws, just cannabis laws. We are tied third in the country for spending in that category with California, only beat out by 2 other states. That alone would save that much money if it was totally legalized, okay? But let's just say we only do medical legalization of cannabis. Okay, currently there's 13,000 inmates serving in Florida prisons for cannabis use or cannabis offenses, all right? If, say, 10% of those people were not incarcerated because of medical marijuana laws on the books, the state of Florida would instantly realize a savings of $34 million annually right off the bat. Also, because it's a black market, our governments do not get to tax it. There's an estimation that if the federal government was allowed, or not federal, but all governments were allowed to tax it, at the regular goods rate, you'd be looking at $2.4 billion annually. But now, of course, we know that's probably not how it'll be taxed. If it was taxed more like alcohol and tobacco, it would bring in $6.4 billion annually. So we're talking large numbers here. I mean, the deficit for Florida with this last year was, what, $3.5 billion that we were short? Well, there's $1.9 billion of it just to stop enforcing laws for cannabis use.
So you're saying some of the medical benefits. I thought marijuana was a Schedule I drug. What does Schedule I means that it has no medical benefit to it? Why does the government decide to schedule it as that?
Well, now that's a very large question. The reason it's been scheduled that way is it benefits everyone but the people for it to be scheduled as an illegal drug. The gangs and cartels, they benefit from it being illegal. They make a lot of money. That's that $1.8 billion market each year that Florida could tap into if it wasn't going into their hands. The other half is the people on the other half that are trying to stop the people who are using cannabis, the good guys so-called, the government and the law enforcement. That's a huge expenditure as well, and they don't want to see their budgets fall because that's their jobs, that's how their budgets rise, to continued large numbers in these kind of arrests. So the only people who don't benefit here is the people. We're in between two factions who would like to continue making that money on us, so therefore that's why it continues.
The good old-fashioned Baptist and Bootleggers Alliance, then, is what we're looking at.
I don't know if that's the facts, but
it's an old saying. Baptists and bootleggers is that they're both going to vote the same because the bootleggers want to maintain that illegal monopoly, while the Baptists want liquor out of the county.
All right. Well, in this case, it's your government.
Exactly. All right. And speaking of the government, what's their relationship with marijuana? How are they? You said that the government has done studies with marijuana patients?
Actually, the only studies that are allowed to continue in our country is through the University of Mississippi at Oxford. It's the only one approved by our government and the DEA. And the only research they provide there is they try to find detrimental effects of cannabis. And they've been doing this for years. And they haven't really found many. But what they have found is things that it's good for, like we've been telling them that it's good for. And in fact, the people who hold patents now in our country for particular inventions are coming from the people who administer all the research and development out of the Mississippi of Oxford, as well as our own government. The United States government holds a patent on cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectors. It was applied for in 2001, and it was awarded in 2003 to the Health Department of the United States of America. And cannabinoids as antioxidants works like this. An antioxidant, we hear a lot on TV. What it does is protects cells, proteins, and DNA from destruction, as well as neuroprotectors, which is something that's very important. It helps with neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, HIV, dementia. These are all things that it would benefit from greatly.
Mm-hmm. And so what is synthetic THC or Marinol?
This is another way in which our government pretty much is in a state of denial, but still wants to be part of the action. All right, what they've done is they've allowed a pharmaceutical company known as GW Pharmaceuticals to extract one known cannabinoid from the cannabis plant as THC. Many people are very familiar with the word THC. You know, it's tetrahydrocannabinol. Okay, and that's only one constituent of 80 that we know of in the cannabis smoke stream. All right, so they took this one cannabinoid, they allowed this pharmaceutical company to synthesize it, which means make it man-made.
Mm-hmm.
Upon doing that, the DEA approved them to schedule Marinol, the synthesized THC, only one active component of cannabis, to be a Schedule III drug, which now means that it has acceptable medical use and can be prescribed by your doctor, but only if it's man-made, derived from the original plant. Okay, so what that ends up being is this pill called Marinol can be sold by our government. It states it has all of these wonderful medicinal value for you. It's being prescribed currently. As a matter of fact, it's about to go off patent, and all of the generic companies are lobbying the government right now to allow them to sell it too. Okay, but what it will happen in the end is if you or I extracted THC from the cannabis plant, it would be illegal still. But if a pharmaceutical company extracts it from a plant, synthesizes it, and sells it to the people, it is now good as gold.
And what about the VA and their treatment plans?
All right, well, there's been a lot of conflict in the VA, and me being a disabled veteran, it caught my attention of what was going on here. If you were found like you were in a pain control program through the VA because you were hurt, and they have you on all these narcotic painkillers, and then you show up for your analysis, and you come positive for cannabis, then all of a sudden you're kicked out of the program. Well, now you're no less of an American, no less of a veteran, no less in need of that program you were in. And it's being accepted in states. 16 states in the District of Columbia have already allowed state marijuana practice. All right, so there's a conflict in those states, because when the veteran would go to the VA, all of a sudden they were getting bounced out of their programs and couldn't get any help. So I believe the name's man is Michael Krowitz. He started an organization to provide access for veterans through the VA, through the regular programs, and if you were enrolled in the state medical marijuana program, you could not be kicked out of that program, lose your benefits, basically. Well, this took some time, but now they have a directive that allows that they say the VA does not administratively require exclusion from drug abuse programs, pain control programs, and any other clinical trials that the use of cannabis may seem counterintuitive to the goals of the treatment program. So basically, you are now allowed in those states, when you have proper documentation, to still go to the VA and still receive the help that you need to get. Now, there's caveats to this. You can't go and ask the VA to help sign any paperwork for you for the state. They won't do that, and they actually have directives against it. But if you come to them with all of your paperwork ready to go, they have to allow you to use the programs that you're entitled to.
Now, obviously, like, we don't have medicinal cannabis in Florida currently. Hypothetically speaking, if someone were using it for medicinal use but was still arrested, what advice would you have to those people?
Well, you know, I'm not a lawyer. I certainly am not one qualified to give anyone legal advice. But if you were arrested and you were using medical marijuana, first thing you must do is not say anything. You need to keep quiet, and you need to get you an attorney that deals with the criminal defense of cannabis users, because they know exactly what needs to be done. And in fact, here in the state of Florida, there's been a man out of out of Boynton Beach, Florida, that's right, Mr. Jeff Kennedy, 53-year-old man. He was brought up on charges for growing marijuana at his house for medicinal reasons only. He was facing 5 years of prison time. But at the last minute, the state dropped the charges. On the day of going to court, Mr. Kennedy, he showed up with a T-shirt on, said, "I'm a patient, not a criminal." He told them that he was using it only for himself. He didn't sell to anyone else. But I guess neighbors or something, somebody saw it and reported it, and so therefore he was arrested. But like I say, at the last minute, they dropped the state dropped the charges. Now, people want to say, oh, it's a medical necessity defense. Well, it more or less is, but the attorney of the state of Florida was quick to come and point out that they are not accepting a policy of medical necessity, and they would view each thing on a case-by-case basis. Well, this is what it boils down to then. His, Mr. Kennedy's attorney, Mr. Michael Minardi, he said this shows conclusively for people in the state of Florida that there is a defense for medicinal cannabis use. And the defense is, for one, you can't be selling it to other people. You need to use it for personal use only. Second one is you need to have a letter from your doctor stating that, yes, in fact, you would benefit from medicinal marijuana or medicinal cannabis. And the next thing is you need a letter from your clergy saying you're not some kind of horrible person, you're an average everyday person. And you need a letter from your attorney that states that you would in fact, or he would in fact, fight this to the Supreme Court. These are the things that Mr. Minardi did for Mr. Kennedy, and he won without even going to trial. There was no such thing prior to this. This happened earlier this year. Before that, I mean, Florida has the toughest penalties and laws on the books for marijuana in the country.
I believe, was it, if you're caught over an ounce of marijuana in this state, you're automatically assumed to be a seller?
I believe so. I'm not abreast of exactly the numbers, but something of that nature, yes. And 0 to, well, not 0, let's say 1 gram or less than 1 gram, as long as it's not 0 to 20 grams is considered, you know, in the same category. And after that, then it becomes what's your distribution, I believe.
Well, we know that Florida is apparently not very good on the, as far as marijuana, you know, the prohibition against marijuana. How would you rate the Obama administration? Because, you know, they came in on a campaign, and he was saying basically he was going to be a lot more humane toward, you know, people who use drugs. But there's been a lot of questions of whether he's actually following through with it, because we still have federal, the DEA coming in and raiding, you know, medical marijuana dispensaries and So I'm not. So I was wondering if you have any kind of opinion on how the Obama administration has been handling this.
I'm not going to say my opinion one way or another. I'm going to say what I've studied and read of what's going on with this administration. They had initially made a statement that they would not use federal resources to go after medical marijuana dispensaries and patients. That's a waste of federal resource dollars, which in fact it is. But that was more or less political campaigning, as we always get from, it doesn't matter what party you're in, they always tell you things and then that's not exactly what you get at the end.
Right.
What has happened is he did not back that up. They still went ahead with raids of the different dispensaries like you were talking about in legal medical marijuana states.
Yeah, in California.
Sure.
Yeah.
That and all, the other 16 states, they've had raids in most states.
Well, the one I was aware of was in California.
California.
They keep raiding them.
And one of the reasons that happens too is because the local government there, in the places that they have these new laws passed, they drag their feet if they don't like it. And so therefore they went a long time without regulations and guidelines being put in place. So people, just as any entrepreneur in this country does, they start figuring out a way to make it happen. So they work and they make it happen. They pop up everywhere. Well, by allowing them to do that and not putting regulations in place and not giving them guidelines, they allowed them to go further than what the law actually intended. So that gave the DEA their reason to jump and just start going all over people because they're illegal, supposedly, even though they still hold the premise that it is all illegal according to federal law.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk into some of the legislation. Before we get into specific pieces, how has Puffum, I believe you already began to lobby in the State House, how is your message being received by the state legislature?
Actually, we went to the legislature this March when they had session. As you can expect, we got some tepid review from some people. It was a little harder to talk to, say, Republicans maybe than it was Democrats. But we did get Republican ears. Republican congressmen and senators listened to us. I even had some that said that they wanted to hear more on the issue, which I really found promising because, you know, the perception is that they don't want to hear it. You know, they don't believe what we say is true. We're all just a bunch of people who would like to get high and make the law so that we can. And when in fact that is not what's happening here, not at all.
Okay, that's good. And so first one we'll talk about is H.R. 2306. What is that exactly?
All right, that's the Ending Federal Marijuana Prohibition Act of 2011. This was brought forward by Barney Frank and Ron Paul, so it is a bipartisan piece of legislation. What this does, the goal of this, is to allow states to form their own laws concerning cannabis and withdraw all federal criminality of the possession and use of cannabis by adults, so that these will be decided by the states with a vote from the people, just as it was intended to be. I mean, the 10th Amendment clearly states, you know, that the state government is supposed to be running what's happening. They only gave this the power to the federal government for interstate regulation as well as foreign affairs, and that was all. Okay, the state created the federal government, so as it should be, important decisions like this should reside with the state, which is supposed to be the shield of the people, the voice of the people. Well, at this point, it is not. It's coming from the top down. The voice of the people is meaning very little. So this act right here makes it so that the federal level withdraws everything it has to do with cannabis, cannabis only. This does not legalize cannabis in any state whatsoever. What this does is withdraws federal interference with the state's business concerning cannabis use. Now, it does, though, still give it the authority for its interstate commerce regulation, which would mean you cannot traffic in between states cannabis. Because if it was voted by each individual state, some states may choose not to, whereas other states may, and so therefore they should be clear of that and not have people bring it into the state. So
basically this is just getting the federal government's hand out of the cookie jar and leaving the decision to the states as
yes,
it should.
It is. That's exactly what it is.
Okay. And going closer to, Curtis.
Well, the problem is that with the Gonzalez versus Reese decision has pretty much put the federal government in, you know, the top of the food chain as far as, you know, going after illegal drugs, because it essentially established that the Commerce Clause, which is, you know, the liberals' favorite for trying to push, you know, trying to get rid of federalism. But it basically says that, you know, the federal government can still be involved in you know, prohibiting drugs, even if the state supports, you know, wants to loosen up the restrictions on marijuana. So that's kind of a difficult thing to get around.
It is. This whole issue is very difficult because of the misinformation that's been placed everywhere, everywhere for the last 70 years to try to advance their agenda, inflate budgets. I mean, and it has. I mean, just the corrections in the state of Florida for the 2008-2009 year was $2.4 billion. That exact same figure in 1988 was $502 million. I mean, they have stepped up incarceration of people, but yet what do you see the statistics say? There is as much drugs as there's ever been in our market, as high quality as there's ever been in our market, as plentiful and as easy to get, even though they just keep putting people in jail. Well, that means you're doing it for money. You're not affecting anything.
Well, prohibition creates black markets.
Yes, it does. It creates criminals.
Right.
Yes.
And closer to home, we have the H.R. 1407, medical use of cannabis in Florida.
Right. This was a House resolution brought about by Representative Jeff Clemens out of Lake Worth, Florida. The point of this bill was to place protections for patients who were using medicinal cannabis, because at this time there are none in this state. All he wanted to do was be able to place the question on the ballot, the 2012 ballot, as to whether medical marijuana should be legal or not legal in the state of Florida. Now, whenever a representative brings it up from the House and they want to have it go to the floor for a debate and a vote, they need a Senate co-sponsor as well. We were not able to secure a Senate co-sponsor at that time. So, like I was saying, some of the major roadblocks to this legislation was the fact that it died because it did not get a Senate sponsor, which means people need to contact their senators, need to contact your congressman and tell them you would like them to support 1407, support Jeff Clemens in his attempt to make medical marijuana available.
Your state representatives and state senators, not the federal, right?
Yes, state. I'm sorry, yes, state.
Okay.
And the other thing is what this doesn't do. This also, just like 2306, it does not legalize marijuana. It puts it on the ballot for the people to choose whether it should be legal or not for medicinal use only. This isn't blanket legalization.
Okay.
Now, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. And what, I mean, like I said, depending on which state medical marijuana, obviously you have California where essentially medical marijuana district clinics now outnumber Starbucks on every block.
Yes.
Michigan, I believe, allows you, what I believe, about 6 plants to grow for personal use, and I'm not sure of the others.
Each one is different from the others.
What would be the guidelines under 1407?
Now, that was not established because that would have been on further legislation if it could have got a vote and was able to be placed on the ballot. Then they would work out the particulars of how much an individual can have of ready-to-use medicine, how much that they can have for plants that are growing currently. All those would be laid out by the legislature as well after the fact.
Okay.
But what needs to happen now, since that fell through, we need to have people go to puffm.org, P-U-F-M-M.org, and sign the petition to get it on the ballot.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Reese, for coming in and sharing all this great knowledge with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And what was that again, puffm.org?
Yes, People United for medicalmarijuana.org.
All right. Once again, is Mr. Rick Reese from the People United for Medical Marijuana. To a little bit close out the show, you may have heard recently the issues with the Duval County Public Schools. The 4 schools that were supposed to be turned over to privatization will be under DCPS for another year. Curtis, I believe you wanted to say your piece on that.
Yes, I just want to, this actually came on the news very lately. Apparently, Superintendent Ed Pratt-Daniels did what he called a bold move. And basically what he's going to do is he's going to take those 4 intervened schools, and he's going to bring in the Education Directions LLC to come and supervise them. And this is all going to cost like more than $1 million for them to come in and actually supervise doing what apparently the school board is supposed to be doing. And the way I look at it is that, you know, if you want innovation, within education, you're going to have to put it all in a marketplace. Let let parents decide where their kids are going to go to school, and then that allows kids, to go to schools that better educate them. And you're not going to be able to do that when you have a public school monopoly. And this, to me, is like, rearranging the deck chairs on a Titanic. You're not going to, I can guarantee you, when we come at the end of the next school year, we're going to be in the same situation that we were before.
It's the same song, different dance. Like I said, every 2-3 years, it's always these same, high schools. Every 2-3 years, we get the same idea, the same difference. And I remember a couple of years ago they installed the IB program at Rains. Ames, I think all one person graduated from it. A couple of years before that, there's another type of, and the common denominator the whole time has been the Duval County School Board and the Duval County Public Schools. What's so bad about trying to, whoever this private company was, I forget the name, they couldn't have done anything worse than what Duval County Public Schools has done for these children.
Right.
For at least 2 decades now, these schools have turned on have underdeveloped these children, and we are seeing the consequences of it. So.
Right, and the whole thing to me is that the school board has been, in my opinion, pretty arrogant about the whole thing. It's just the whole idea when the state board was looking at taking out, giving it to a charter or educational management organization, I think it's called, they were very arrogant about saying, why should you take it away from us? Well, in my opinion, because you were mismanaging those schools. Of course it should be taken away from you.
Yeah, those high schools, pretty much since the FCAT has occurred, have they ever gotten anything higher than a C? And usually it's either a D or an F.
Yeah, I usually see a D or F with them, so. You're not going to get any change until, the parents have control over the schools the way they need to.
And like I said, 15 years worth of data, I think a statistician would say that's a good case to be made.
Right.
So, but, all right, so.
Okay, we have a picnic coming up on September 10th. It's at Memorial Park, I believe.
Yeah, Memorial Park on Riverside Avenue.
10th, I think we're doing about 1 p.m. And the whole idea is to allow everybody out there who is a libertarian but not really involved in the Libertarian Party right now to come out and talk to us and become more involved in what we're doing.
Yes. Yeah. As Curtis just said, we have our kickoff to 2012 cookout, September 10th at 1 p.m. Everyone feel free. And Libertarian Party of Duval County is supported by liberty-minded individuals such as yourselves. Please go to www.jaxlp.com and click donate. So we appreciate the support, and thank you once again for tuning in.